Okay, welcome to our talk at Stampex this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As you can see, we are doing an Adventures in Philately webinar this afternoon, but with a difference. Devlin and Marcus and I have been doing webinars for the past couple of months, doing one a month in a series, and they've been huge fun. We've been doing those on Zoom, so people can join from all over the world. Today we're in person as well, and also virtually with people that are watching Stampex from around the world. So just to explain what we do, we pick a different subject each month, and we just have a kind of a relaxed conversation. Devlin and Marcus will present, and I'll chip in with questions that I have or what the audience has, and we just learn. I personally have learned so much already. So it's really good fun. Just to explain a little bit about me, I'm the editor of Stamp Collector magazine and also the allaboutStamps.co.uk website. So if you want to know more about the webinars, do come onto the website and you can find out there. And it'd be great if you could join us for our next session, which is later this month on the 18th of October. So to introduce Devlin and Marcus, they're both from the Museum of Philately. So Marcus also has a wealth of experience in philately and stamps, having worked for David Feldman for many years and travelled across the world, buying and selling stamps, assessing, valuing stamps. And likewise, Devlin has a great expertise in stamps and postal history, having been a trader himself and now a writer, journalist, and also works as a representative for David Feldman, and Devlin also writes regularly for Stamp Collector magazine. So it's not much better endorsement than that. So to tell you a little bit about the Museum of Philately, I'll pass over to Devlin to explain that.
Excellent, thank you, Matt. Yes, I'm Devlin from the Museum of Philately.
The Museum of Philately's talk is now live. Speak auditorium. Thanks.
We are live. Welcome. Yes, I'm Devlin from the Museum of Philately. For those of you who don't know what the museum is, it's a digital platform which captures and preserves award-winning and unique collections, collectors assembled them, and the rarities that make up parts of those collections. And it's there to inform current sort of public philatelists as well as hopefully inspire the future generation of philatelists, whether experts in the future or dealers or professionals within the industry. And there's something you said before, Marcus, about future. Do you want to say something about the future of the museum?
Yeah, I mean, the initial concept which Devlin's explained is already a big project, but we really want the museum to be a resource center for all of philately, not just highbrow philately, but for all collectors, from right down bottom. I mean, today we had a roundtable discussion about what it means to create a digital exhibit. How do we get young collectors or novice collectors into collecting? And so, at the museum, we are looking into building an app that's going to give young collectors or new collectors the ability to actually create their own digital exhibit. So this is, we want to be progressive, we want to be moving forward to bring philately into the 21st century. There's many more things through expertise, online libraries. We have paper restorers, somebody who can help those people who have items that would like to have the item restored. We've got, again, more things to do with expertise. We'd like to connect with the expert bodies. We'd like to connect with the experts themselves and explain a little bit more to collectors about the different fakes and forgeries. So there's so much more that we want to bring to the museum for the future. Any more thoughts?
Yeah, that takes me nicely onto the first slide. And as you just heard, we've been holding these webinars with Matt, and we thought it was a great idea, a great initiative, because we could share some of the insights that we had from working within the industry, and we wanted to try and present it in a more engaging way and have a bit of fun. So be informative, and so the first one really was on threats and forgeries and funnies back in July. That's still available, I think, and yeah, season pass and watch it. And then we did Fads and Fashions in Philately in August, and this month we've just recently done everything we didn't know, with everything that don't tell you about the world's most famous collectors. And we've got another one coming up next month, The Real and Wonderful, and then there's another couple scheduled for November. That's just November, isn't it? So we're going to give you a taster of what we've been doing on the web, in person, and also it's so what are we looking at today? We're going to look at how collectors change the hobby. A bit of a strange title, but you'll hopefully find out what we've chosen is. And we're going to look at stamp collecting, sort of humble beginnings, and how it was really just an obscure pastime, but how then sort of collectors and entrepreneurs turned it into more of a sort of financial enterprise, and they literally changed the world of stamps. And we're going to look at some of those collectors today who changed. And the agenda, pretty simple. We're going to set the scene with looking at some background stamp collecting. Then we're going to get straight into sort of the juice and look at the collectors who in the very sort of genesis of collecting changed the hobby. And we've broken that down into sort of three main sections: the organisers and the dealers, the market changes. We're going to take a little sneak peek at problems. I think that's quite an interesting one. And then look at influencers. So, before we begin, even with our webinars on, we've got a little icebreaker for you. Take a look at these three gargantuan collectors. I mean, big as they have huge collections of millions. Which one of these famous collectors had a fleet of boats? Was it A, Joshua K. Jr., B, Colonel Edward Green, or C, Henry J. DV? So have a little think about that. We will reveal the answers a bit later on, but it's just something to think about, just something abilities. So, without further ado, let's get on. So, to set the scene, the background. So, if you sort of do your sort of homework, you can say that initially it's kind of considered to be a bit of a diversion from life sort of tedium. And it was mainly sort of children and ladies that were involved in collecting in the very early stages. And it was kind of a bit mocked and scoffed at, if you like. But pretty quickly, things changed. Romania, the French word, emerged in the late 19th century, South Romania, and it took what was a pleasure activity, if you like, and took it into a financial enterprise. Early dealers emerged and accessories appeared. Philately actually became sophisticated. And this led to the growth of stamp collecting all around the world. And indeed, just a snapshot of what happened between 1850 and 1865. Some of the sort of early stamp collectors, if you like, Owens, Stan Gibbons, William S. Lincoln. Some of these names might not mean anything to you, but by ones that are not. William B. Brown, John Walter Scott. And at the same sort of time, there was these sort of scholars of Philately that emerged and wanted to rebrand it. And there was lots of talk about what we should call it. And a Frenchman called George Urban termed Philately. And it stuck. It stuck with us, despite sort of resistance from many, particular sort of very well respected collector, Dr. Jacques Garand. And then there was a lot of organisation going on. There was people forming catalogues, which I know they're forming sort of, you know, places of actual collecting today, but they weren't always the thing. There was some very innovators, if you like, of catalogues. And then indeed in 1965 we saw the first ever auction. So let's take a closer look at some of these people. I mentioned catalogues with Oscar Maria He's credited with the first catalogue. I mean, it was a fairly basic thing. He meant to be a limited number for mainly his friends and some of his customers. And there was others that quickly followed. I mentioned Dr. Jacques Legrand. He was kind of one of the very first kind of people who took Philately's scientific approach to philately. And then we've got Walter Dorning-Bexon, who was a guy who started the Manchester School of Philately. So you can see that even in the late 1800s, people were starting to take philately seriously. It's no longer considered something for whiling away the hours of the afternoon. Some seriously educated people emerged on the scene. And indeed, collectors such as Frederick down as one of the fathers of Philately, was again an early collector. And of course, we mentioned Edward Stanley Gibbons, who, if you don't have heard of Stanley Gibbons, you probably haven't heard of Penny Black. He was born in the same year as Penny Black. Interesting. And I've put Sir Edward Denny Bacon in because he's kind of one of the first sort of professional philatelists. He sort of changed his job and career and became a professional philatist. It's quite astounding, really. This was in the late 1800s. He got alongside collectors and started to help them put their collections together. And we'll talk about some of those in a moment. So what about market changes? Well, what happens? Very wealthy individuals began to assemble great collections and seek to establish the best collection in the country, a region, or indeed in the world. World rarities, we hear that phrase now, but that wasn't always the term. But suddenly these wealthy guys thought, let's identify the rarities. Let's buy them, let's find them and buy them. And that created competition. There was rivalry amongst the early wealthy collectors to form the greatest collection. And it's to the places. John Marks, do you want to say a couple of things about these things?
Well, what I wanted to actually say is going to rivalry. I've been in the auction business for 40 years, and without rivalry, an auction wouldn't exist. You need that competition. So that competition can feed a frenzy. And so what happened with these two guys is that was really the beginning of auctions and the beginning of what we know as the formations of great collections. And they created a frenzy for great stamps at that time. I mean, the ones that we're going to look at, the ones that came after them, the Burruses and the Casparis and so on, but these two really were the leaders at the time, and they I say they didn't hate each other, but there was an awful lot of animosity, and one didn't want the other one to get a particular stamp. So this created that rivalry, which to say that do we as auctioneers want that? Well, we do, but obviously Thomas Tapling, I guess we all know where his collection is, and of course Ferrari's collection. If you go to the Museum of Philately, you will see some of the great collections in the museum, but we've also provenanced them. And so you go to Ferrari, read his bio, and then see stamps that he owned that come from collections. So.
And they set a trend, as we were saying, but after them, we saw other great philatelists emerge, and they kept up this kind of rivalry. They seem to compete on an international basis in auctions, and indeed they even started to employ agents. So other professionals entered the sort of fray and offered their services to find these great world rarities and to help them complete their collections, indeed to write them up, and hopefully be one of the world's greatest ever philatelists. I put up there Hind, and he was around towards the back end of the time that Ferrari was collecting. He was a very wealthy Englishman that moved to America and was held bent on sort of buying anything that he did form a great collection. Crawford's one of the early sort of ambassadors of collecting essays and proofs. Before that time, no one really collected them. And now they're quite coveted, quite important aspects of collections, using a game changer in terms of making people change their focus from perhaps just stamps that weren't used. So that's looking at what happened before, what's the story. Most exhibitions, certainly at competitive level, tend to try and tell a story. And you kind of think, well, if it wasn't for author, I think essays and proofs probably don't have much of a story to tell. Is there anything you want to talk about? So these guys have got.
Are we going to go on to the slide of verse plays? Is that later on?
Yeah.
That's something they're interested in. Well, no, actually, for me, what's exciting is that, of course, even some of these guys who died many years ago, I've handled over the years I've been in the business. I've handled many items from these collectors, and that's what's exciting. Is that you sit here, 100 years later, and say, well, I remember Charles Mathra pack, and there's a famous Brazilian item called a pack strip, and it's after Charles Mathra pack, and I've handled that stamp, and it's actually not a stamp, it's a strip of stamps, and it proved a very important piece. It proved the fact that the first stamps in Brazil, bizarrely, were printed in sheets of the 30, the 60, and the 90 range, and there was a gutter between them. And so what you have here is you have a 30 and a 60 with the gutter, and this was flat. And it's a multi-lot. It's probably multiple millions of dollars or pounds today. So I guess that's that's the exciting thing for me to see these names. And Morris Burris, of course, holds a special place in my heart, but I'll explain that later.
And here's another slide with a few more places that you probably recognise. At the top of that, Ernest Ackerman, back to the Senator in the US Congress, he formed great collections. He came to London to exhibit, won a gold medal. So he crossed the transatlantic boats. And you've got Caspari, who's a legendary collector, known as the connoisseur. It's very picky about what's actually they have to be a very good quality. Generally, you buy anything unless it's in sound condition. But he was a bit of an enigma. He didn't organise his collection at all. It's kind of kept in shabby albums, and sometimes he mislaid and lost items. And we've got Kings. Do you want to say anything about Kings?
Actually, it's funny. Somebody asked me earlier, I think it was yesterday, about George V. Well, it was actually not asking me about George V, asking me about the Royal Collection. And we have a collection of British piano on exhibit here. And they asked a simple question: is this collection better than the Queen's collection? And I said, well, look, there's no question the Queen's collection is certainly one of the greatest collections ever formed. But of course, George V really was the collector. Once he was no longer around, the royal family hadn't continued on the mantle of being collectors. So it sort of stopped with George V. So to say they have the greatest collection of British piano is probably not true. They certainly have some great things. And then King Carol, the sad part about him is, of course, his collection got dispersed when he had to leave Romania. One of the items that he owned was the 3 skilling yellow, which I have handled on, I think, 4 occasions. So it is exciting when you are this. I think we coined the phrase "the hobby of kings" as a king of hobbies. So anyway.
Yeah, so what we're trying to sort of present here is that it went from this very obscure sort of humble beginnings to something that was very glamorous, that even kings were buying things internationally, using agents and bidding at auctions and sending agents around the world to pick up priceless treasures, treasures.
Just like to ask a question. So, the name of the talk today is How Collecting Changed the Hobby. So, someone who endorses collecting essays or a particular country for the first time, what kind of sparked them to do that? Do you think they collected lots of them and thought, I need to make some money here, or kind of promote it, or was it just a kind of altruistic? You know, did they just want to further the hobby?
Okay, well, we are, you know, we've got influencers and some of that might come up in there, but I think that in this phase of sort of philanthropy we're looking at, that some of the collectors focused on their own nation. So take King Carol, he had a fantastic sort of Romanian collection on building, and then he did become a very serious collector. And instead of him, that he was never seen without drinking one hand and a lady in the other. But the only thing he's interested in is stamps. And he brought quite a bit of glamour and glitz to the hobby. You know, I'm not saying I agree with everything that he stood for, but oh wow, what could we do with the King Carol II now? Because also he splashed his money around and couldn't do interesting in there, just because it was one of the world's rarest stamps. But yeah, a lot of these guys, they were competitive, and they did try and accumulate all world collections for them, particularly in the early stages of Latin.
Trying to answer your question, I would say that in the early days, I think people were experimenting, and I think there was so little known. So it was like, it's like the discovery of the Antarctic. I mean, if you think about today, it really isn't a big thing. But back then, and one of my passions actually is Antarctic philately and all those people who went out there, and you think about that today, it's not really a big feat. I mean, people are going to the Antarctic all the time, but back then it was difficult to get there, and it was very cold, and we didn't have the gear. So I'm just making examples that often I think it was people who were entrepreneurial, and they were on the cutting edge of something really new, rather than perhaps linking it to something that perhaps there are altruistic reasons why collectors collect today. I think back then it was more because it was a new frontier. You know, I hope that explains it.
And because of that, it's extremely wealthy sort of individuals forming incredible collections. Provenance became a thing. Philatelic pedigree was never a thing before these great wealthy people turned up. So they changed the whole landscape of Philately. Just these are people that nowadays are probably by Premier League football teams or Spanish football teams to win the Champions League. These were the wealthiest individuals on the planet, and they wanted to accumulate the world's best collections. And as a consequence of that, when their collections came up for auction or were sold, people started to piece together the philatelic pedigree. Suddenly, provenance emerged sort of late 18th and early 1900s. It's a fundamental part of our business today, isn't it? No, you want to.
Well, I did want to say something quickly. Is also, if you do have a question, by all means, pop your hand up, and we can stop at a moment and try and answer your questions. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. We're open to our audience. But yeah, provenance has, it's actually in every field. That's the beauty about provenance. Whether you collect stamps, or you collect art, or you collect cars, or whatever you collect, provenance is important. Where did it come from? Because you want to know, because it brings a cachet of, well, genuinely, it brings a cachet of being probably genuine, which is a big thing. Of course, expertise and genuineness in our hobby is huge. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything that comes from Ferrari sale is genuine. So you can't just go on provenance. That's important to remember, that it's not a cachet saying it's definitely genuine, but it's certainly one of the building blocks.
Yes, and in some examples it helps with the pricing and the value of the. So let's take a look at influencers. We've got a number of influencers who want to highlight. There's one particular one that we feel inspired a generation of collectors. The rise of the flattist, innovators and pioneers, those that sort of created new markets. And finally, the how prices are affected by one or more debtor emerging into the scene. So here's a guy, Frederick J. Melville, who kind of inspired a whole generation of young collectors who then later became Asian collectors. As a young man, got interested in stamps and applied to the Royal Society. He got turned out he was a bit too young, so he decided to set up his own society called the Junior Philately Society. And that's still with us today, which is incredible because it's now called the National Philately Society. It's one of our two national UK societies. But this was a guy who was a prolific author and writer, and through that he inspired people to get involved in stamp collecting and to take it more seriously and to progress in their kind of philatelic journey. He wrote many books, and he was recognised for this by being next on to the role of distinguished philatelists in 1921. So he's early forward, that's the first time that role was in operation. And oddly, for a British guy, he was entered onto the American Philatelic Society Hall of Fame, which is quite incredible to the Britain. What about influences that helped with societies and groups? Dr. William Byron, who was actually a British philatelist, inspired a whole nation of Egyptian philatelists.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started my philatelic career, I was given what we call the studies to work on. So it would have been Ottoman Empire, Persia, Afghanistan, Indian states, and Egypt was one of the things that was thrown in. And I quickly realized that this man was held up as a god for all Egyptian collectors, and it really was. They revered him. They wanted to own things that he had. So Byron really definitely was a trendsetter as far as one of the Egyptian collectors wanting to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, and you can see there he's highly decorated. He won the Tappan Medal in 1931 and the Tillard Medal in 1986. Signed the role. What I'm really interested in is that he was the guy that I studied circles. He came up with that idea. In fact, the Egyptian study circle was the first ever philatelic study circle. Quite game changing. You think how many study circles there are and how they've been since the first one that William Byron came up with.
And of course, the exciting thing about at that time, certainly Egypt was very much collected by all the expats, because you've got to remember that Egypt was a bit like Constantinople. It was a crossroads for the world. So you had the French were there, the French post offices were there, the Italians were there, the Russians were there, the Germans were there. The Italians, the British were there. They all had post offices. So it really was a crossroads. So hence, later on, the collectors tended to be Italians and French and so on and so forth. But what's exciting today is that a major number of collectors who are in the Egypt Study Circle, which I'm a member of, they're all Egyptians. So it's moved, you know. But he set trend, and he's still really revered among them.
Yes, indeed. We've had some auctions recently with material, and it's got Dr. William Byron's governance. Another influencer, I suppose, he's kind of a serious stamp collector.
Yeah. Well, the exciting part about Morris Burris and why I said earlier that he's very dear to my heart is that besides over the years handling many things that he has owned, the piece in the middle, which is the famous Mauritius printing plate, which we sold a number of years ago. The exciting part was I got to actually meet the Burris family. This piece of metal bronze piece of metal, was found at the bottom of the safe that was in possession. It was his great nieces, two ladies who never married, and of course, you remember, or maybe you don't know, but in the 60s there were many sales of the Burris collection. So he sold everything in the 60s, but he kept one item, which was dearest to his heart, which was this. But it was just stuck at the bottom of the safe, and it just was wrapped up in a piece of paper saying "Plaque de Oncle Maurice." So it's the plate from Maurice's plate. But it actually probably, I could say, it's probably one of the most significant philatelic finds in recent years. And it was something that we all heard about the myth of the plate. The significance, of course, of the post office Mauritius stamps. I don't know if you all are aware of it, but the significance is, of course, it was the first British colonial stamp and the first issue in the post office Mauritius. Of course, this was a quasi-error in the sense it should really have said post-paid, and then they quickly changed in 1848 to post-paid. But this plate proves that the penny and the tuppenny were printed together, which is very unusual. So anyway, that's just an exciting little piece about Mr. Maurice Burris.
Yeah, who was a trendsetter in the sense that he was very, very serious stamp collector. Purist, right? And he goes down and just one first level collectors in time. What about this? This is a topical one. Influencers, innovators. Well, fancy take this stamp on a world tour. I mean, did you come up with that idea? Well, Erwin Weinberg, back in 1970. Fronted an investment syndicate that purchased the British Guiana 1 Magenta for $280,000. It's a lot of money back then. And everybody probably thought he was absolutely pointless because he wasn't collecting it to put in the album. He put this and hang it to himself and got security guards and armed vehicles and took it around the world, promoted it. And he was a real game changer in the sense of raising the profile of world rarities.
Yeah, and I was very privileged to know Erwin, and the exciting thing is that not only did it change, it was a game changer for the stamp, but it was a game changer for him, because he was a small-time stamp dealer with big vision, but this changed everything for him. He became a significant player. Once he'd done this. So not only did he set a trend, he benefited from that trend that he set.
Yes, he did. Not only from all the publicity that he generated, which helped to lead the stamp, but it sold 10 years later for $935,000. Of course, we all know that Trim anonymously at the time, but obviously came out afterwards. But yeah, a real innovator, and it's quite topical at the moment, I think, where that stamp is right now, and what they're planning to do with it. Guys did a flashback of Erwin Weinberg. I know that when I heard the news Stanley was bought it, I was delighted, excited, but I couldn't help but get Erwin Weinberg out of my mind. Is this the 2021 version of Erwin Weinberg? We'll find out. Hopefully, we'll be sitting here in 10 years' time. We're picking up Stanley Gibbons and saying, here they are, game changers. What impact that will have, we're yet to find out.
And I don't know if anyone's followed the news, but they are fractionalizing stamp. Have you heard about that? So that's, I mean, that is a trend-setting thing. I mean, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but as Devin said, it is, it could be a game changer. The NFTs is a big thing today, where people buy and sell digital images. So who knows where this is going to go. So it's exciting to have companies like Stanley Gibbons having the courage to buy the stamp and now trying to do something innovative with.
Yes. And I think it helps industry. I think Owen had that stamp a great deal, became literally the world's most famous stamp. But when I see on sort of social media people say it's the world's rarest thing, I get troubled by that because, of course, there's plenty of stamps, there's only one of a kind. So are they all the world's rarest stamp? But it's certainly the world's most famous stamp. And it started with its time.
So yeah, the idea of fractionalization is where you suppose you take imagine an image that's got pixels, right? So each pixel is a part or a share. Pixel would be a share in the stamp. So what they're trying to do, in a sense, it's a quite simple concept of selling shares. But they fractionalize it by splitting it into tiny little modules and then selling those modules.
Okay, influencers, pioneers. There's been many pioneers, but I did want to just highlight one. Robson Lowe was considered to be sort of a pioneer of postal history. As we know, if you look back in the sort of stamp collecting sort of history books, there's a period when we just soaked all the stamps off covers and chucked away the envelopes and envelopes and things like that, and all say that they got to this stamp, well, what colour that came off. And yeah, basically, postal history wasn't really something that was pursued.
Yeah, I mean, when I started my career, sorry to interrupt you, when I started my career, so it would have been in the mid-70s, it really was all about stamps. Stamps was it. I mean, covers were kind of funny and obscure, and what are these things? And slowly but surely, I mean, Robson Lowe had been writing about it long before that. But people were still collecting stamps. That's really what the big thing was. And then in 1981, there was a boom and bust in stamps. I mean, and I was right, well, not right in the middle. I was at the beginning of my career, but I saw it, and it was a massive. I mean, I can give you examples of stamps today. Ask me afterwards. Stamps today that were selling in 1981 for prices that they don't even sell for today. That's how boom and bust it was, and it was so dramatic. It led to a revolution in postal history. Through the early 80s onwards, postal history became the thing because perhaps everybody got burnt with the stamp crash. And in fact, what's happened now is quite interesting. And just for maybe some of you know, when postal history has continued on and it's very strong, but stamps have come back. Stamps have come back in a major way. I would say in the last 10 years, I've seen a huge increase in the interest in stamps, mint stamps, which always struggled for a long time. And I talk about mint stamps, I mean the rarities. So it's just interesting how the different things changed.
Yes, Robson Lowe, as well as writing lots of books about postal history to sort of educate people and inspire them, he started doing dedicated postal history auctions, which at the time was very unusual. I've got a quote here from him because I love this. This is something that describes perhaps collectors. He was famously quoted as saying, "Philately are students of science, but postal historians are students of humanity." And working in the business, I'm sure Marcus will agree that that's quite a poignant sort of observation, because typically, people get stamps like perforations, the watermark, where was it printed, the engineering part of it, if you like. And postal historians are interested in people, places, situations, the events that surrounded the sending of it, or the transit routes, the postmarks. So, and indeed, often the stamp collectors become postal historians. Yes, I am. What about influences, those that affect the price of items, things that perhaps go for a lot more than we expect. Unfortunately, as we put in our estimates, sometimes they're a bit ambitious, and other times they're perhaps low. But there's an auction here which Marcus can tell us about that far exceeded kind of expectations. Very famous collector.
I think sometimes we forget that trendsetters sometimes don't realize they're trendsetters. So they just accumulate over many years. When they come to sell their collection, and they become trendsetters in the sense that their collection comes up for sale, and all of a sudden, and I was at the first of a number of sales of Anatoly Karpov's collection of Belgium, and again we come back to that question of philatelic rivalry. There was some serious rivalry in the auction room on that day. The prices were astronomical, not never seen ever before, and actually repeated. So there was that boom. I wouldn't say bust, but it was a boom in 2 or 3 auctions, and I'm convinced that the trendsetter, unbeknownst to him, was Anatoly Karpov, who used to be a very, very, very nice gentleman. Know him well.
Yeah, I mean, he's best known for being Russian chess grandmaster and the world champion chess. But you make an interesting point there. And indeed, he was a serious Latinist, still collects the Olympics and Imperial Russia. Example of trends. So, should we get back to our teaser? Did you work out which one of these famous philatelists books? I'll give you a reminder. Three candidates are Joshua Philately, Green, and Joe Devon. They all sent a great collection, but which one had fleets of books? Any ideas? A, B, or C? A. Any more takers? C. A. Okay, it is done well.
And of course, the famous story about Colonel Green was, I don't know if you have all heard about the inverted Jenny, which is a 24-cent US stamp where the airplane is upside down. But Colonel Green owned a big sheet of the stamp, and unfortunately, one of his boats went up on flames, and the sheet was fortunately recovered, but quite a few of the stamps were damaged. So you have examples of what they call C3A in America, 24-cent invert, and it's got gum issues and perforation issues, and that's because of the fire on the boat. And of course, some of them did survive in good condition, and they are selling for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars.
Yes, he's an interesting guy as well. He had, I think, 17 boats, including a 250-foot, $800,000 yacht. Speedboats, houseboats, dried up onto his Florida Island. As you probably guessed, he was quite rich. But he formed one of the greatest stamp collections of the 20th century. When they came to sort of, when he died and they came to sell his collection, it took best part of 4 years, 20 auction sales, and in the 1940s, 1.8 million, still quite more. And months were talking about 100 sheets. Final thought. We've talked a lot about various people, and there's lots of others, but limited times we'll just highlight a few bits. But what we're trying to sort of say, the message is that influencers invigorate the hobby, keep it vibrant, bring about change. And market changes lead to essential parts of our being replaced by trends and track new buyers. It's kind of like the evolution of philately. And we kind of want to ask the questions: can you shape the hobby? And what do you think the next trend is? Yeah.
There's a lot of issues with mental health. And I think this could be a way to get people back at it.
So, gentlemen,
really, it takes people out of being some reality.
So the gentleman,
that's what I think.
yeah, the gentleman has suggested that philately can help in mental health, and I would concur. And in fact, I've had huge numbers of conversations in the last, say, 3 or 4 months, people coming out of the pandemic and saying that they've been saved by their hobby. And I think one of the realities about philately and postal history is that people get lost in that world, which is wonderful. And so many of, unfortunately, pursuits in our world today are, we were talking to somebody today about collecting Pokemon cards, which has become a big thing. And people are spending hundreds of thousands, even millions of pounds or dollars on these Pokemon cards, but there's no depth to them. There's nothing really to them except the fact that they're selling for a lot of money. And I would concur that, yeah, it would be wonderful. I mean, obviously with the Museum of Philately, we want to promote not just great collections, but we want to do more for expanding the hobby. So I think, yeah, definitely.
Especially for government and as an issue with the Labour Party.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Do you have a phone number I can call? No, excellent. That's excellent. No, not yet. Yeah, well, we're working on a lot of projects. It's been an exciting show, actually, and we've been talking to a lot of potential partners. So watch this space. But yeah, I mean, it should be. So thank you for the question.
Just coming back to how people influence the hobby. The people that we've looked at are generally wealthy, a certain type of person. You know, I haven't got that many small players, so I don't get it. So, you know, is it possible for someone like me or some of us here, anyone at Standplace today, to influence the hobby? Is that a realistic thing, or is everything being done by these wealthy people?
You're asking a question, I'm going to answer it honestly. I think anybody can change the direction of your study. Anybody can come up with an innovative idea and change it. Because if you look at some of those people, they're in my book, for example, very common American family. He had no real sort of credentials to do what he did, and to sort of have the guts to sort of get some very wily sort of financial backers, funding, and get the money to go on a world tour. It's quite expensive to have one. It's quite expensive to do it now. It's a lot cheaper than it was back in the 1970s. So yeah, I think anybody can have an idea. This standard needs this. And bold enough just to do it. That's my own thought and passion. And indeed, some of what we do in Marcus in the museum, that's the whole sort of ethos of it. We want to. We do genuinely want to educate and inform people that we interact with. That's the fun one we're doing. We also want to try and inspire another generation of professionals or collectors, whatever level, because those are the people that will be the game changers in the future. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think, thanks to Matt, the fact that we're doing these webinars actually, our audience each month isn't huge, but then they do then get put up on YouTube at a later date. Is that right? So I think the digital age. I'm sure we all have children or even grandchildren, and the digital age is here, and we are definitely not a trend-setting generation, but I think we can influence the younger generation and share our hobby and be excited. And we do have to move into that 21st century. We've talked a lot about that this week.
And also, would it be right for me to say that there's still a potential to research so many different things? So I think we've spoken on webinars before about it's collectors that write certain books that people then refer to. It's collectors who decide to go down a particular avenue, and that becomes something that other people can follow. And presumably there's those kind of opportunities still out there for people to kind of find their niche and then really push forward with that and be pioneers. Do you think that's fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, the opportunities are enormous. There's so many different fields. Some fields were popular and have been dropped. And so there are fields out there that can be reinvigorated. There's enormous opportunities to take new fields and develop them. And of course, with the digital medium today, we don't need to necessarily write books. We write articles. I mean, Devlin is a very accomplished writer, and I'm delighted that we have him on board with the Museum of Philately, because he's writing in an exciting and new way. If you get a chance to read any of those articles, they're written in a different style, and we do have to do excite and move on.
Okay.
So any other?
Any other questions or thoughts? I don't think so. So I have this So yeah, so coming back to our webinars, obviously, so at the start we're doing a series of webinars at the moment, and Stamps the Weird and Wonderful, we're doing that on the 18th of October. So that will be on Zoom. So please do come and have a look at allaboutStamps.co.uk, and that's where you'll find all the information about our webinars. So we've got that one in October, and we've got one in November. And then we'll be discussing what we want to do in the future, but we've really enjoyed presenting. As you've seen today, it's quite a kind of relaxed forum, and we encourage people to ask questions and kind of put their comments across as we go along. So yeah, in fact, the address is on there on the screen, allaboutStamps.co.uk. And obviously the museumofphilately.com is where you need to go to find information about the museum. There's some fantastic items and collections on there for you to explore. So I think, yeah, thanks so much to Devlin and Marcus for their time and their expertise, and thanks to everyone for coming along today. Thank you.
Show goes on though. Check. We're not finished.